stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Kelly, if you lead the land acknowledgement.
Thank you. We would like to acknowledge that the City and Borough of Juneau is on Tlingit land and wish to honor the indigenous people of this land. For more than 10,000 years, Alaska Native people have been and continue to be integral to the well-being of our community. We are grateful to be in this place, a part of this community, and to honor the culture, traditions, and resilience of the Tlingit people. Gunash Jish.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mr. Bryson?
Present.
Ms. Hughes Scandies is absent. Ms. Atkinson? Here. Ms. Wall?
Present.
Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Ms. Hall?
Here.
Mr. Steininger?
Here.
Mayor Weldon? I see you.
Here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Deputy Mayor Smith.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We have no special order of business this evening. Any motion to approve the two set of draft minutes before us? Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I move the Assembly approve the January 6, 2025 regular Assembly meeting minutes and the February 10th, 2025 special Assembly meeting minutes, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I would just like to note that I did find a few corrections, mostly grammatical, that I have forwarded to the clerks.
Very good. With that slightly amended motion and no objection, those minutes with the slight changes are adopted. Madam Manager, any requests for agenda changes?
No, I do not.
Thank you. And now on to public participation on non-agenda items. I have a couple people on Zoom. Madam Clerk is grabbing the rest of the list. We'll limit public testimony to 2 minutes. Very good, thank you. And we'll start with folks on Zoom. Do we have Jen Liam on Zoom? And if so, move her over.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Please say your name and the part of town you live in, and please begin your testimony.
Hello, my name is Jen Liam, and I live in, I guess, what would be considered the Lemon Creek area. But I am speaking on behalf of the Montessori Borealis Site Council this evening. We understand the tough decisions you face in allocating funds for projects that benefit our community. However, we also see a significant opportunity before you, one that has been long awaited by Lemon Creek and a school in need of a playground. By fully funding the planned playground at the Zontaghini School site, which serves 260 pre-K through 8th grade students across Juneau, including those from Montessori Borealis and Juneau Community Charter School, you would be making a lasting investment that benefits both the students and the many children in the surrounding neighborhood. While Lemon Creek does have 2 existing playgrounds, a small one on Alloway Avenue and another at Segubuye Park, neither is located near Zontaghini, nor are they designed to serve the hundreds of students who attend school there every day. Approximately 250 children living in Lemon Creek attend other schools in Juneau, including about 160 at Harborview Elementary and 90 at Kaktaguwuhin Elementary, because the Lemon Creek boundary is split between those 2 schools. This area is also home to a significant number of children who lack adequate play spaces. Gruening Park, the housing development off of Renninger Street, is home to 133 children. Despite this concentration of children, the area still lacks a fully developed playground. Now is the perfect moment to change that. This project is unique in its ability to serve both a school and a community at the same time. Beyond school hours, on weekends, and throughout the summer, the playground would provide a much-needed space for children in the neighborhood to play, stay active, and connect with friends. We urge the Assembly to fully commit to funding this much-needed space and make a real lasting impact for the children of Juneau. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Liam. Any clarifying questions from the Assembly? Seeing none, Ms. Liam, thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Gavin Liam, also possibly on Zoom. You may bring him over.
Hi, my name is Gavin. The playground at the DZ school isn't just a school playground, it's my neighborhood playground. In the summer, my brother and I could ride our bikes there, but right now it's just an empty dirt field and covered area. Maybe some of you didn't have a great playground when you were kids. If you could go back and change that, wouldn't you? You have the chance to do that now, and for a whole lot of kids. If the playground isn't fully built, we'll only get parts of it, and we don't know if or when we'll ever get the rest. We need more than a dirt field and the hope of a future playground. You have the power to make sure we get the playground we need, not just someday, but now. This is our chance to do it right. Please do what you can to make sure we get a full playground. Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin. Any questions for Mr. Liam from the Assembly? Gavin, thank you very much for testifying. Next, we have Bruce Wyrock. Mr. Wyrock, thank you for joining us. Please hit the button at the base of the mic to make it go green, then state your name and part of town you live in for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, members of the Assembly. My name is Bruce Wyrock. I live in Juneau. For decades, Juneau has recognized and encouraged trade and economic development between Whitehorse and Juneau. Juneau is an international airport because of the air commerce between Juneau and Whitehorse. Juneau has promoted business enterprises in each city, Whitehorse and Juneau, and the close relationship between Whitehorse and Juneau led Whitehorse to become Juneau's sister city. And that was affirmed by the Assembly in Resolution 1485 in 1981. I'll just leave that here. I asked the Assembly to review that resolution and rediscover how important Juneau views our economic and cultural relationships with Whitehorse, and in turn with all of our Canadian neighbors to the east and north of us. Second, to the chagrin of some and to the huge benefit of Juneau, we have strategically attempted to expand government in this community because of the economic benefits that government provides in the way of grants, jobs, economic development that all exist through private sector downturns. Federal jobs in particular at NOAA, the BIA, Coast Guard, NIMS, the Weather Bureau, Forest Service, Park Service, and through the support and transportation by grants to the state DOT, support our ferries, the EPA, and through grants to DEC, and all of that flows through and supports a Juneau government bureaucracy. All of that provides and supports a tax base in our private sector economic development to Juneau small businesses and strengthens our schools and neighborhoods. My first ask of the Assembly is to send a very strong message to Whitehorse specifically, and Canada generally, that Juneau reaffirms the ideals in the 1991 resolution and other exchanges Juneau had in 1990, and ensure all of Canada, particularly Whitehorse, knows of our affinity to Whitehorse and Canadians. And I suggest we remind our congressional delegation of the important economic relationship that this community has with Whitehorse and Canada. The second ask I have is the Assembly send a strong message in writing to our delegation and let some of them who have forgotten know how important the federal government generally and federal jobs are specifically to our community, and the huge human economic impact to all of us in the private sector when we eliminate federal jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wyrock. Any questions from the Assembly? Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Could I just have that resolution number one more time?
I'll just pass it on to you.
Okay, never mind.
I just don't want to say, just do this, do that. I'm happy to help draft anything.
Good. Any further questions from the Assembly? Seeing none. Mr. Wyrock, thank you for coming in tonight. Next, I have Jen Ms. Thorne, thank you for joining us tonight. Please say your name, your full name, and part of town you live in for the record, and then you may begin your 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Jen Thorne. I live and work in the Lemon Creek area for Montessori Borealis. Madam Mayor and members of the CBJ Assembly, as teaching and support staff, including recess supervisors of Montessori Public School, we would like to request support to improve the outdoor environment at the Xantakahini school site. We left the Marie Drake building last year, where we had developed a garden, outdoor learning space, and a schedule coordinated with Harborview to use their school playground for our recess time. We now take turns using Xantakahini ball field and covered basketball court with the Juneau Community Charter School. With our student populations combined, we serve about 260 students. The area is not fully fenced, and the surface of the ball field presents some safety challenges. Lack of adequate drainage turns the surface into a lumpy ice rink in freezing conditions and boot-grabbing muck in the rainy conditions. We don't have the budget to purchase outdoor equipment such as kickballs, soccer balls, lower basketball hoops, ball pumps, jump ropes, and other outdoor equipment at this time. We understand that developing an adequate school playground for the needs of the children will probably need to happen in stages and creative partnerships explored. In the short term, we would like to request, please provide a way to mitigate dog feces in our outside recess area, provide signage pertaining to picking up after your dog, and a stand with dog pickup bags. Move the soccer goalposts widthwise to one of the ball fields to free up the other field space for other types of play. Move the sand that is currently in the northwest corner of the outdoor play space, currently just outside the temporary fencing, to inside the temporary fencing. Fence the entire playground, including several gates that can be secured. Include some of the surrounding forest and a dedicated garden natural play space within the fencing. Our community of teachers and parents would be more than happy to help make the allocated forest space child-friendly. Hopefully there will be additional funding in the future to complete the anticipated playground. We see as longer-term goals the following: prepare the surface area of this great playground to promote significantly better drainage, add accessible paths, and add play structures and swings. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration of our request. Sincerely, Montessori Borealis.
Thank you, Ms. Thorne. Any questions from the Assembly? Ms. Thorne, if you haven't, would you send that list to either me or the Borough Assembly email? Appreciate it. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak on non-agenda items this evening? Seeing none, the consent agenda. Any public requests for consent agenda changes other than ordinances for introduction? Seeing none, any assembly requests for consent agenda changes? Seeing none, a motion, Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I move that the Assembly adopt the consent agenda and I ask for unanimous consent.
Seeing no objection, that motion is adopted. Moving into public hearing. Madam Clerk, item 21.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Smith. Item 21 is ordinance 2024-01, little b, capital AD, an ordinance appropriating $50,000 to the manager for the Departure Lounge ADA Elevator Capital Improvement Project, funding provided by Airport Revolving Funds.
Very good, Madam Manager.
This ordinance would appropriate $50,000 to the Departure Lounge ADA Elevator CIP. The funds would be used to hire an architect to conceptually identify locations and associated costs for an elevator in the Departure Lounge. This elevator would serve the Departure Lounge to the 121 air carrier apron and would facilitate ground boarding for passengers who are unable to navigate stairs to board at Gate 6 or when ground boarding is necessary. The total cost of the design and installation is currently estimated at $2.5 million and has been deemed eligible for federal FAA funding. The Airport Board of Directors reviewed this at the December 12, 2024 meeting, and the Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its February 4, 2025 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on this item? Seeing none, we will bring it to the Assembly. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I move the Assembly adopt ordinance 2024-01, lowercase b, uppercase AD, ordinance appropriating $50,000 to the manager for the Departure Lounge 88 Elevator Capital Improvement Project, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Seeing no objection, that ordinance is adopted. Item 22, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Ordinance 2024-01B, capital AE, an ordinance appropriating $3 million to the Statter Harbor Improvements Phase 3 Capital Improvement Project, funding provided by DOCS funds.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would appropriate $3 million to Phase 3D of the Statter Harbor Phase 3 CIP. Phase 3D of the project would provide for the installation of new curb, gutter, lighting, paving, and landscaping at the excursion bus parking lot around the restroom facilities. These improvements primarily serve cruise tourism at Statter Harbor. Therefore, the use of DOCS funds for this phase is appropriate. The Docks and Harbors Board of Directors reviewed and recommended approval of this ordinance at the January 30, 2025 regular board meeting. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its February 4, 2025 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Are there any members of the public who wish to testify on this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it to the Assembly. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I move the Assembly approve ordinance 2024-01BAE and ask for unanimous consent.
Seeing no objection, that ordinance is adopted. Madam Clerk, item 23.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Ordinance 2025-09AM, an ordinance amending the City and Borough Code relating to assessing standards of property tax.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance was drafted in response to the passage of SB 179 by the state. It was reviewed by the Assembly Finance Committee on January 8, 2025, and forwarded to the full Assembly. On February 3, 2025, the Assembly sent this ordinance back to the AFC for further discussion of economic development exemptions. At the February 5, 2025 AFC, 2 amendments were made and have been incorporated. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its February 4, 2025 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public who wishes to testify on this ordinance? Seeing none. Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I move the Assembly adopt ordinance 2025-09AM, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson. Seeing no objection, that ordinance is adopted. Madam Clerk, item 24.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Ordinance 2025-14, an ordinance amending the City and Borough Title 29 Code relating to election processes and procedure.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
In 2024, the Clerk's Office received 4 petitions from citizens trying to engage in direct democracy. About 15% of the signatures initially turned in were rejected. Of those, more than half were rejected to the strict and outdated requirements laid out in 29-10-090 about what is, quote, an adequate address. This section of code was written before clerk staff had real-time access to the State Division of Elections voter database, which allows staff to quickly verify if a person is a Juneau resident who is eligible to sign a petition. This led clerk staff to propose Ordinance 2025-14 with the help of the Law Department. This ordinance removes many technical or procedural actions throughout the entire election code and places them into rules of procedure, which will allow election staff to better adapt to changing technologies. It also requires that the rules of procedure be available to the public online. This ordinance removes redundancies, rewrites complex language, and updates terminology definitions to make the code more readable by the public. Additionally, this ordinance provides some minor changes in timing, including the candidate filing period and when ballots are mailed out. The municipal clerk recommends the below timing, so the ordinance, if adopted by the Assembly, would take effect before the April 2025 initiative/referendum cycle begins. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its February 4, 2025 meeting, and the Assembly Committee of the Whole reviewed this ordinance at its February 24, 2025 work session and forwarded it to the Assembly for adoption. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it to the Assembly. We do have some amendments, but we'll start with a motion. Mr. Steininger.
I move the Assembly adopt ordinance 2025-14 and ask for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Steininger. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and nice try, Mr. Steininger. Anyway, I have an amendment. It should be in your red folder. It's an additional paragraph, and it's between pages 201 and 202 of the packet, or between page 37 and 38 of the ordinance. So I'll give you a moment to read that, and then I'll talk about it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A little more time, or do we want to hear from the mayor about her intent? Very good. Madam Mayor, please go ahead.
Thank you. So my amendment would be to add section 2910, 29.10.120, preparation and form of the ballot. And I'll read it for the record. Subset A is, if the petition is properly filed, the election official, when directed by the Assembly, shall place on the ballot as part of an initiative or referendum a brief, neutral, and succinct explanation of the proposition or question. Such explanations must be approved as to content by the Assembly or the attorney. Subsection B would be the proposition or question shall consist solely of the question to the voters, excluding any whereas, intent, or policy statements submitted. And C, the ballot prepared shall be worded. Actually, there's two shall be worded, so let's just use one of them. Shall be worded so that a yes vote on the proposition is a vote to enact a proposed law or repeal an existing law. And my intent is just to try to make this simpler for a voter. If needed, if something is confusing, because we can't change the wording, we would use A, and we would just have a brief, neutral, and short explanation of the proposition. Subsection B is because on the last initiative, some people thought the whereases were factual, some people did not, and we don't want to get into the business of, and nor do our attorneys, I'm sure, of deciding which is factual and which is not. And item C is just trying to make it simple for the voter. So if they vote yes, then it's clear that they want the proposed law instead of having a double negative. So that is my amendment, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Or Ms. Wright can also help with that too.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A few questions. Ms. Adkisson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I just, on the one part in the first line, the when directed by the assembly, I guess, is that a change from current practice? Because I do worry that does open up to sort of inconsistency on the assembly's part of having this for some measures and not having it for others. I don't know if the clerk has thoughts on it or the mayor, or I'm just going to throw that out there for anyone.
Madam Mayor.
I'll go ahead and start, and then Ms. Wright or Ms. McEwen can touch on it. This is a new paragraph, so it hasn't been done in the past as far as I know, but I can be corrected by either of those fine ladies.
Thank you, through the chair. So we took language from elsewhere in the code. When we can, we mirror other language. This language is in place in other sections. It also, much of this language matches the state language in B and C, for example. So it is not new or novel. It is new and novel for petitions for this section, but it's not new and novel for other type areas of the code.
Ms. Adkisson.
Just a quick follow-up. So the way I read this is, in your view, would that be anytime a petition comes to the assembly, your staff would then ask, do you want to have this? Or would that have to be an action the assembly takes on its own to direct staff to create this on the ballot?
Ms. Wright.
Thank you. So through the chair, each time, my position would be each time we would come and ask you whether you wanted us to affirmatively do it or not, and we would seek guidance from you. It would not, we would trigger that.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and maybe my brain's too cloudy to know what we do with petitions now. Can you talk me through what changes in how a petition is on a ballot now versus here? Sure, thank you for the question. So currently the petition, so I'll take the last one, which is the most recent example. The petition, all we do is we notify you that it's come in, that it's been certified by the clerks. It's kind of a pro forma, you accept it, you know that it's happened, and then it's placed on the ballot. There's no neutral statement, there's no succinct statement. It's put word for word with no further explanation. We just copy and paste onto the ballot and onto into the voter's guide. I believe this year, which Ms. McEwen can say a little bit more, we did a pro-con in the voter information guide because it was an important way to get both sides of the information out, but I don't know if that is normal.
If I might,
Oh, Ms. McEwen, you were unmuted. You were very faint.
can you hear me okay? Is this better?
You are very faint.
Okay, hold on, let me see if I can do this. I have everything up as high as it'll go. So sorry.
Still having it.
Really faint? I don't know if you can hear me at all. I'll try and be as loud as I can.
It's getting better. Yes.
A little better? Okay. So in order to answer the first question about is this similar language to where else we have it, if you look in your ordinance on page 12 of the ordinance, this is exactly the same language about the neutral statement to be approved by the assembly or the attorney for our propositions that the assembly decides to put on the ballot. So this is just mirroring that same language for an initiative or referendum. With respect to the question about last year's referendum or initiative, the clerk's office, when we are preparing the initiative or referendum booklet, we have a very straight, clear line of differentiation between how we're processing the election and conducting the election, which is entirely separate from the voter pamphlet that the city manager's office puts out that would have a pro and con statement. And because of APOC rules, we keep those very distinct, clear lines between us conducting the election and anything that the city managers puts out. We don't even find out who is involved in the pro and con statements when the city manager is making those arrangements for the voter information pamphlet. And hopefully that answers the questions.
I think so. Ms. Wall.
And the follow-up, I think, is would this change that firewall? I mean, because in the past, the clerk's office would just be verbatim, you know, putting what was on the petition on the ballot, and now you need to be working with others. Is no. Okay, maybe someone could
I can answer that one.
clarify for me.
I can answer that one. I'm probably a little louder. It doesn't change any firewalls. It would be working with my office to place it on there. And that's also how it works for the State Department of Law as well. The Attorney General drafts a neutral language and puts that on there. So it doesn't affect any firewalls that we might have up.
But this includes the assembly.
Right. So that also wouldn't I'm trying to think if there's any situation where I would be worried about it. I think that this is, I mean, we could change it. We certainly could change it to, you'll just do this and we'll notify, you know, our office would just do it and we'll notify you. So you're not saying yes or no if you want to take out that piece. But I think that you're only directing that it be done. You're not taking any steps on what it actually says. That's the role of the attorney. So I think that's a policy call on that one.
Mr. Kelly, did you have a question?
I did. I kind of feel like it was possibly answered because I think most of the conversation has been focused on the top line, like when directed by the assembly. But I was also looking at the bottom line of Part A where it says such explanations must be approved as to content by the assembly or attorney. And so I was kind of wondering how that would work. Like would the language just go before the attorney, and then it sounds like that might have just been answered, but I'm not sure. So we would go before the attorney, and then we could potentially edit or reject or approve the language that is submitted.
That's right.
So I can tell you that how it's in general worked, and I feel like probably there needs to be an amendment to the amendment because of some concerns with the crossing of powers here. First, because you've got the election official at the beginning, which as well is worried about, you know, directing, and then also the co-approval by the assembly and the attorney. In general, this is language from elsewhere in the code, but usually the way it has worked is the attorneys have drafted it when I looked back, and I haven't seen that the assembly has ever edited. It's been a just kind of check mark. This is happening, but I can absolutely see how something else could happen based on this language.
Thanks. I guess just piggybacking onto that, like it makes sense for that last section in the you know, on this reference in page 12 to a referendum, or that we would put, that the assembly would put before the voters. Like that makes sense to have the assembly have the content or for that, but potentially, I guess, yeah, okay. Like that would make sense because we want to
So you certainly
clearly see, yeah.
You certainly could make it a more definitive statement. If the petition is properly filed,
and take out the election official when directed by the Assembly. If the petition is properly filed, a brief, neutral, and succinct explanation of the proposition or question will be placed on the ballot, period. And you could even say as drafted by the city attorney, if you want it. And that might get at the three concerns that I've heard.
Ms. McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to further
If you could
elaborate
keep
on,
trying that microphone a little closer.
okay, I don't know which is picking up, if it's picking up from my headphone microphone or from the computer, but I'm as close and loud as it can be. When an initiative is certified, it has an opportunity for the Assembly to either enact substantially similar legislation within a 45-day period or repeal, if it's a referendum, the ordinance or legislation within a 30-day period. So during the process, if the Assembly were to be giving direction, it would happen during that window of opportunity. If you weren't going to be amending this language, this would be that time slot in the 30 days to repeal or 45 days to enact substantially similar legislation. That would be when it would happen. So if it helps in the placement of when and where this would take place, that's the time frame in which any kind of assembly direction would be given to the election official regarding anything on an initiative or referendum petition.
Okay, thank you for that. Brief at ease. How long do you need? Couple minutes at ease. I'll bring the assembly back to order. Mr. Kelly, or any further questions? Seeing none, Mr. Kelly, did you have an amendment or anything you'd like to propose?
Yes, I move that we would strike the
Pause for a moment. And she's back. Okay, Mr. Kelly, please continue.
Thank you. I guess to simplify this, I'll say I would move that we, hold on, I'll just do it like this. All right. I move that we strike the election official when directed by the assembly shall place on the ballot of the initiative or referendum. That we also strike such explanation shall be approved as to content by the assembly or attorney. And that we add after the word question shall be drafted by the attorney and placed on a ballot and a copy provided to the assembly. And I can go ahead and read the entire thing as it would look amended. So, or at least part A. So if by a motion were unamended to be adopted, it would read, if the petition is properly filed, a brief, neutral, and succinct explanation of the proposition or question shall be drafted by the attorney and placed on the ballot and a copy provided to the assembly. And I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection to that motion? Seeing none, pause. Ms. Atkinson.
Just to clarify, and parts B and C of the amendment, that will remain?
Correct, yeah, my additions and striking do not affect parts B and C of the amendment.
Just double checking, I remove my objection.
Very good. Seeing no objection to that amendment to the amendment is adopted. Amended is amended, excuse me. Now we have the amendment as amended before us. Ms. Wall.
I'm going to object. I see where the mayor is coming from in terms of wanting these things to be neutral. I think they are by default not neutral, and I'm not sure we can do anything other than let the petitioners say what they want to say and have people vote on it. So if this passes, then you know, I'm interested in moving forward and seeing what happens, but I'm not convinced that the status quo is a problem.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Wall. I had a question. Would the petition, if this amendment were to be adopted and the ordinance passed, would the petition in its entirety be printed anywhere, like in the voter pamphlet or any other thing that would be, broadly accessible to the public? I mean, on the website, I know they'll print it, they'll, put it up, but would it be in any of those other documents that are sent out to all households?
So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, so there's a couple of places the full petition would be, it's still required to be in the petition booklets. So the petition booklets would have the entire thing. Anyone who's going to potentially sign would see it. That's a smaller group of people. As Ms. McEwen said, the voter pamphlet guide is run by the city manager's office and put out, but it could be in there as well as a pro-con. So there will be statements, but there's nothing requiring that to be in there. It is always available on the website and at the clerk's office. But for just someone who is maybe not paying attention and just looking at their ballot, with this, it would not be on their mail-in ballot. They would have to go looking for it elsewhere.
Ms. McEwen.
Thank you, and hopefully my sound is working better, I'm not sure. The vote centers will each have copies of all the full text of the legislation, in addition to it being published on our website. Since the elections are being conducted by mail, we do put a lot of information on our website for the election, the voters who would like to find out more, and we make sure we include full instructions in the ballot package that you receive with your ballot, saying for additional information, please check the website. It all depends on, like the other. Last year we had one ballot petition packet that had a 40-some page ordinance that was being repealed. So had we certified that particular initiative, the initiative question was a 2 or 3 sentence, but the full text of what was being repealed was 46 or therefore pages of full text that people who might have wanted to look at it would have had to go to the website or to one of the 2 vote centers to actually see a copy of that full text that was being repealed.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McEwen, in that case, I guess there's no guidance on saying what should be put on the ballot regarding a petition. So, I mean, you obviously wouldn't have put the whole petition on the ballot, and it would have just been a short question about shall ordinance whatever be repealed. Is that kind of what you would have expected the language to be on the ballot?
That's correct. And similar to that, 2 years ago, we had a referendum on the property tax assessment disclosure, property sales language. And that was a question of should ordinance whatever be repealed. That was what was on the ballot. There was a much more extensive information given in the pro and con statements that the manager's office included in the voter brochure. And then also we had the full text of the ordinance at both of the vote centers as well as on the elections webpage.
Very good, thank you. Any further questions? Ms. Cathcart.
If I might, I would just, as you're thinking about this, one of the key things to also think about is we're trying to keep the ballot to a one-page, ballot versus multiple pages, because obviously that can get very confusing. So condensing it, having just the required information on there, and then knowing that people can go to other sources to, and anybody that has an initiative or a petition or referendum are typically going to be out in the community spreading the word as well. But key thing would be to keep our ballot as small in size as possible, so for ease of both the voters and election workers.
Very good. Any further questions from the Assembly? Any comments? We have a motion and an objection. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Okay, so I'm getting clarification because this is the amendment to the, this is to Mayor Weldon's amendment.
Yes,
correct?
as amended by
As
Mr.
amended
Kelly's.
by Mr. Kelly, thank you. So, Ms. Wall,
No.
Mr. Steininger,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
Yes.
Ms. Atkinson,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Bryson,
No.
Deputy Mayor,
Yes.
and, Mayor Weldon's already a yes.
Yes.
Which you might have changed your mind, right? Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. The amendment, Mayor Weldon's Amendment 1 passes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yeas, 2 nays. Yay me.
Nicely done. Thank you. All right. I am going to pass the gavel to Mr. Bryson for the purposes of my amendment.
Now we've got another amendment?
All right, well, let's keep going. We didn't take any of these. So we're going to go to Mr. Smith's amendment. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 amendments here. They're on the back side of the page. It was on Mayor Weldon's amendment. The first amendment I would offer is the top part, and it would add to section 2907-005, the words at the bottom, that the clerk's office is required to keep the assembly apprised, and this is regarding the election rules of procedure. The clerk's office is required to keep the assembly apprised of all significant changes and will provide an annual report to the Human Resources Committee. My goal for this is just to have a little bit of just a check or an update from the clerks. A lot of things are moving from code into the rules of procedure. I have full faith in our public servants, but I just think maybe as kind of our role, good to see what those things are, any changes. I mean, there's things on like the report and I think, Dropbox locations and things. And again, full faith, but I think I just prefer just a quick update. I think the language is broad enough that they're not going to, have to, hopefully not to be a burden on our team, but that they just provide a brief update to the assembly and then a short report to the Human Resources Committee. So that is my first amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. You've heard the motion. Are there objections or questions? Ms. Atkinson?
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. I did have a question on the burdensome on clerks question. Madam Clerk or Ms. Cathcart, do you think this will be a significant extra burden on you guys?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to cut off my supervisor. Because thank you, through the Deputy Mayor. No, it will not. We do already, during your reorganization meeting, we submit the report of, the final certification of the election. So if there's some additional information, we can definitely add that, and it would still go to the full assembly, but we can also include it in the HRC as well.
Thank you, Ms. Cathcart. Any additional questions or comments? We'll go with Ms. Hall, followed by Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. I guess my question would be, when would the timing of this annual report, and I'm not sure who would best answer that question.
Ms. Cathcart.
Thank you, through the Deputy Mayor Chair, Mr. Bryson. Typically, the timing would be is that we put the full report to the Assembly at the reorganization meeting. Human Resources does not meet until November, but you would see that report at the November Human Resources Committee meeting, because we're excited to wrap up elections our own selves and move on to all the other stuff. So.
Thank you, Ms. Cathcart. All good, Ms. Wall. Ms. McEwen.
And I would just say that because this is related to the assembly or the election rules of procedure and any changes to the rules of procedure, we would likely be submitting a report in June or there sometime in the spring after the petition season has wrapped up, but before the filing period of candidates, because that's when we would be finalizing any kind of rules of procedure changes that would be implemented in advance of the upcoming election cycle.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. If you did not hear, she was explaining how we get lots of information in June and July as they're prepping for the new election cycle. Mr. Kelly.
Actually, Ms. McEwen answered my question.
So thank you, Mr. Kelly. Any additional questions or comments for this First Amendment? Seeing none, were there any objections? None. That First Amendment is approved. We'll go to Amendment 2. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. We talked a little bit about it at the Committee of the Whole when we looked at this. I guess my perspective is I do find it valuable for the candidate filing deadline to end on a Monday. Things happen late, last minute. I mean, in my case, nobody had filed, on the Friday, and over the weekend, I went, it was, anyway. So I feel like there can just be use in having that weekend and then the following Monday for, things to happen and people to get signatures and things. I discussed with the clerks and the attorney possible changes to the timing and the dates. And my understanding is if we wanted to keep having the filing period end on a Monday, it just made more sense to leave the filing period as it is now in the status quo. So, that is the amendment. It's a little, I guess, anyway, the attorney drafted this language, so I'm assuming it's good. Though I was also kind of expecting undone things and whatever, but, so, yeah, she did make it easier, much easier, yeah.
So Mr. Smith, the amendment would be to go from that Friday at 4 deadline to a Monday at 4 deadline or 4:30.
And I believe it would still open on a Friday, run through a weekend, run through the full following week, and on that following Monday. So it would be the same as because currently written, I believe it opens on a Monday. Maybe, no.
Ms. Cathcart, do you want to maybe correct us on a little bit of information here?
Apologies. Currently, we open on a Friday, close on a Monday, so you have 2 weekends that cover the time period. Yeah.
And
Mr. Smith?
I guess just a question. And as proposed in the ordinance, it would open on a Monday and you'd have 1 weekend and it would close on the following Friday.
That's correct.
Very good.
All right. Ms. McEwen, did you have something to add before I go to questions?
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. This would be for anyone following along in the ordinance on page 7 of the ordinance, lines 7 through 9, and it would just revert back to the original language that's currently in the code and just remove those changes that were proposed.
I'm sorry, that time I could not hear it.
I'm so sorry. This is on the ordinance, page 7 of the ordinance, if that is helpful. Lines 7 through 9, and would just revert back to what the code currently reads rather than the proposed changes in the ordinance.
All right, I'm going to go to questions from the committee. Christine. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Wall, sorry.
I like the informality. Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. I appreciate Mr. Smith's explanation for why. I know we just talked about this, but I've already forgotten. I would love to hear from the clerks why they proposed the date changes in the first place.
Ms. Cathcart.
Thank you, Chair, through the chair. This was, if I can remember, it was actually Ms. Hirsch that had brought it up, our other deputy clerk, to kind of extend the period. And so one note, I think what Ms. McEwen was also trying to say is by changing those dates, it reverts basically all of those back. So the time to withdraw, what is it, C through F is what it would just revert everything back to how we currently have it in the ordinance.
But the real motivation was to extend the filing period.
Yes, but we're happy to do whatever.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. This is for the maker of the motion here. I hear on the wanting a weekend before the end, but isn't it the longer filing deadline ultimately better? I'm just a little curious why you're so stuck on that last weekend.
Deputy Mayor Smith.
Yeah, thank you. I guess my thought is things are happening up until the end. They're, currently on the last business day before filing would be, as proposed in this ordinance, it would be a Thursday night. Therefore, then people would have just the day of Friday to gather signatures, whereas now the last business day before the filing is a Friday night, and therefore they'd have the whole weekend and Monday to gather the signatures. So it's just, people maybe can adapt, but also I think it just allows people some time to, for last minute things as things are moving along. So that's my rationale.
Ms. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. I would like to speak in favor of the amendment, being someone that tends to be, well, I believe it was Mr. Steineger's race, there was no one, and then all of a sudden there were two people. And I think for working people, having the opportunity on the weekend to scramble and pull it all together is a really helpful thing. And so I think, Mr. Smith, I support this amendment for that reason, to give working people a little more time if they, at the last minute, decide to throw their name in. Thank you.
Additional questions? Mr. Steiniger.
And I guess this might be for Ms. Cathcart. If the rationale behind the proposed change originally was lengths in the filing period, have we seen complaints from potential candidates about the short duration of the existing filing period?
Ms. Cathcart.
Thank you through the chair. No, we have not, because I can say we'll see, typically how it has gone is we'll see a few people show up the first day, and then the majority of people will show up that last day. I mean, with spatterings of people in between, but it really does kind of end up being that final push and the thing that everyone talks about over the weekend. So.
Additional questions? Were there any objections to the motion? Seeing none, Mr. Kelly.
I don't need to speak to my motion.
Are you objecting?
Yes.
Okay, so we have an objection. Is there anybody that'd like to speak to the motion or against? Ms. Wall.
I'll also speak for this amendment. I appreciated the impetus behind the change, but my experience has been like Mr. Smith's experience, that the way people work, often they're waiting to see who else is going to run, and then they need a little time. If we move to vote to ranked choice voting, this might change, and in that case, maybe it would make more sense to extend the period.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Madam Mayor.
I would speak to the amendment also for the reasons Mr. Smith gave. I don't think you're going to change behavior much, so I don't think the length of the candidacy filing period changes much. You're going to have your first ones come through, and then you're going to have your late ones, but I'm agreeing with Mr. Smith. If I only have Thursday night to convince somebody to run, I don't stand a chance, but if I have all weekend to work on them, then I stand a chance of getting somebody to run.
All right, I'm going to throw my 2 cents in. I am going to support this motion. If somebody is trying to figure out from Friday night till Monday if they're going to run for city council, they have way other issues going on, so they've got enough to worry about. We'll give them the weekend to figure it out. But I would strongly recommend anybody who is interested in public service that, like, now's the time to start learning about how to serve on your local governing boards. Are there any further questions? Madam Deputy Clerk, we have an objection. Would you call the roll?
I'll go ahead and withdraw my objection.
Oh.
Thank you.
Seeing no objection, that amendment is approved. I'll bring it down to you, Mr. Smith.
Okay.
Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Yes.
If we just ask a brief point of order, because we may have been talking, but after Mr. Steininger made the motion, was public testimony requested? Or before the motion? Nobody can remember whether that question was asked, and so I would suggest that before we actually vote on the final amendment, that we go back and make sure nobody is here for public testimony.
Thank you, Madam Attorney. Was there anyone, member of the public, wanting to testify on this ordinance? Sorry if I didn't say that earlier. Does not look like it. Thank you for the reminder, though. Okay, we now have the ordinance as amended by the 3 amendments. Mr. Steininger had moved it. It has been amended. Are there any objections to the ordinance as amended? Seeing none, the ordinance is adopted. On to new business. Madam Clerk or Madam Manager? Who leads? Madam Clerk? Or maybe just you, Madam Manager. Go ahead.
In your packet, you have the hardship and senior citizen disabled veteran nonprofit late filed real property tax exemption application. There is one property owner that has requested the Assembly authorize the assessor to consider a late filed exemption for the property assessment. The Assembly should consider the request and determine whether the property owner was unable to comply with the April 30 filing requirement, AS 294503OF, CBJ Code 6910021D. The burden of proof is upon the property owner to show the inability to file a timely exemption request. If the Assembly decides to accept the late filed exemption request, the application will be referred to the assessor for review and action. I recommend the Assembly act on this application.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Manager. Mr. Bryson, did you have a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. The Assembly has considered this one late filed exemption on property assessment, and we request that Gerald Bennett be allowed to have the property exemption. I move that the Assembly accepts this late filed exemption and refer that to the assessor, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Very good. Any objection to the motion? Seeing none, that motion is adopted. Staff reports. Madam Manager.
Thank you. I just want to talk a little bit about the memorandum of understanding that's in your packet for HESCO barrier installation for riverfront property owners. We've amended this a little bit from the original version that you saw in October to really divide it into 2 parts. One is a notice to property owners, and the second piece is a memorandum of understanding. And the reason why we did this was to just make it incredibly transparent to those property owners what was up for negotiation and what was not. So the notice to property owners says, these are all the things that we CBJ are responsible for during this project. For example, proper installation, maintenance, determining alignment, working with the property owners to establish times to install the barriers, and all of kind of our obligations. Then we also have an ask of the property owners that they will allow us access to their site, that they will identify any potential hazards, that they will notify us if they see any damage to the HESCO barriers. So this document just establishes those roles and responsibilities. We also have a memorandum of understanding that will accompany this document. That is where property owners can document special extenuating circumstances. Maybe they've got a deck that needs special accommodation. Maybe they've got, I think the example that the city attorney uses is there's a sleeping baby, and so work needs to be done during a particular time period. Any number of special circumstances can be documented in this section. But I think it's important that the property owners along the river know that we are not required to have their signature in order to do this project. And so I just wanted to make that clear to the body and the property owners. We will be mailing this out to property owners, but also the project managers are in the field. They'll be in the field tomorrow with contractors doing site visits, and they will have this MOU as well they'll be taking pictures. They've developed these really close relationships with the property owners, and we really want to preserve that. So I would ask that, if property owners have questions related to their property, like, hey, I want to make sure this fence gets documented, and I want to make sure you move it instead of taking it down because I'm still going to need the fence for my dog. Those are things that we can work out. But terms that are not negotiable are compensation for placing the HESCO barriers on property and things like the length of the term. We, of course, would like these barriers to be up for as short of a time as possible, but we just don't know how long that will be. So just trying to be exceedingly clear in how we present that information. I thought I would also give you just a little project update. The HESCO barriers are en route. The total value of the barriers and the installation is $2.4 million. And as I mentioned, we have 4 contractors on board who are beginning site work, beginning site assessments this week. And you do have a resolution that you approved on the consent agenda for a DEC loan with 50% forgiveness. So just a tremendous shout out to the state for their creativity in applying this funding source to this project. And then wanted to let you know, I'm still waiting to hear from the administration on their development of a work plan for the requested $10 million to start the investigation study. If you recall, we managed to get language included in the American Recovery Act, and we advocated with the Army Corps of Engineers to recommend our study be included in their work plan. We advocated with the Office of Management and Budget to approve the work plan that the Army Corps of Engineers recommended, and we were supposed to hear about that mid-month and have not. We reached out this morning to our partners at Army Corps of Engineers, and they have not heard, nor is there an updated timeline for when they will hear. So just wanted to provide you with those updates.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Brief questions. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Very brief. Under the project update, thanks for letting us know about the HESCO barriers being on their way. I just wanted to confirm that this is just the HESCO barriers for phase 1 that are on their way, or are they going to be sending them all at once?
You are correct. This is just for the first phase.
Very good. Mr. Bryson.
I thought at one point that the HESCO manufacturer, when they gave the presentation, said that they could be planted in, like they could plant flowers or bushes on top of that. I didn't see anything in the property owner responsibilities. Is that something that need to be like included if some people are planning on putting bushes in them or just flowers? And it says don't manipulate them or don't mess with them. Is there a way that we could indicate that what they are allowed to do with their HESCO barriers? Could they put pretty flowers in it?
They should work with the project manager through that MOU to, understand exactly what can be done. Because I certainly don't have a clear understanding, but I saw the same great pictures. In fact, I've been looking for grants to maybe do some like beautification of the HESCO barriers, so I know that they can be done. I just, rather than kind of trying to like spell out the ifs and the thens and, because we don't want them to puncture the sac, and, it'd be probably best for that to be the kind of thing that would be worked through the MOU.
All right, I'm sure every citizen listening that wanted to plant flowers in their HESCO barrier is listening right now. Thank you, Madam Manager.
Very good. I just had one question. Anything you can tell us about what you're seeing in the modeling that you referenced there?
Yeah, so on Friday, we saw the first review of the modeling with Michael Baker. And, the modeling does show that the HESCO barriers are working to prevent inundation in all the areas that we anticipated, right? So View Drive is still an area that is going to see some inundation under an event. But so we're running those models, and perfecting them and hope to be able to distribute more detail on exactly what that looks like. For example, what I don't have is like when we have a 17 stage flood, what's it look like exactly? But that's the type of data that we want to be able to get to you and the public, in addition to updated inundation maps. That's also like, absent HESCO barriers, updated inundation maps is also something that we've prioritized with Michael Baker.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, do we have an anticipated timeline on that?
Madam Henry.
Phone a friend says soon.
Thank you.
Very good. Anything further on this agenda topic? Seeing none, moving into assembly reports. Just a note, we will be having an executive session, and I've been warned it may be lengthy, so just consider that in your comments here. Madam Mayor, Mayor's report.
Thank you. I just have one item. We heard from someone talking about joint resolution, or excuse me, a resolution to Whitehorse, and just letting the assembly and the public know, we submitted a letter, or I wrote a letter to them on February 5th that was mailed to them to emphasize that they are still a sister of ours, and we are trying to remain friends through this difficult time. And I concluded it with saying, I hope to go visit Whitehorse. I usually do once or twice a year anyway, and invited them down. So just letting the body know that. That's all I have.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Committee and liaison reports. Ms. Wall, Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I was not at our last Finance Committee meeting. Thank you, Mr. Bryson, for leading that for us. Wednesday, we will meet at 5:30. After our Committee of the Whole with Committee of the Whole with Eaglecrest at 5:30, then we will go into Finance Committee. We will be having an update from our investment managers, so that should be interesting in this time of uncertainty. We'll be reviewing our audit results, so the audit is in your packet. Please read it. We still got some work to do there. Then we'll be talking a little bit about some of our finance-related assembly goals. We had quite a few that we came up with in the retreat, and I'm looking for feedback from the group on what are the priorities before or during the budget season, because some of those things have impacts on our budget, but we've got a long list, and so some may be things that we hold off till the fall if we don't want a ton of budget meetings, which I know we try to be careful about. So be thinking about, Angie wrote a great memo of kind of all of those goals and upcoming topics. So as you look at them, think about which ones are your priorities for the short term. That is it for finance. I do also have an update for the Joint Facilities Committee when you're ready for that, if you're going to do that right now.
Go ahead.
So I realized, because we had a few testifiers on the John Zucchini Playground request tonight, that I hadn't provided an update to the full body on that project and the Joint Facilities Committee. So that committee did meet probably about a month ago now to talk about the playground request. What that committee did was ask staff to flesh out a few different options for that project. The Public Works Committee had asked for feedback on one option, and after reviewing that option, the committee said, let's look at a few so that we have more kind of choices. And so my understanding is staff have done that. We're going to bring the committee back together sometime soon to talk not only about the playground, but also potential bond projects.
Very good. Thank you for that, Ms. Wall. Mr. Bryson, lands.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. This past lands that we had, we took public testimony on the Hunatoto dock. There were approximately 19 testifiers, and we went about 5 minutes into the committee of the whole. I did chair the finance, and we had the community groups present to us, let us know what their community grant request was. And I met with the Ocean Guardians at Gastineau Elementary, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade girls who are very passionate and very excited about removing single-use plastic out of Juneau and keeping it out of the ocean. And so we will be hearing more from those ladies. That's all I have for you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Ms. Adkisson, Human Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Today in Human Resources Committee, we looked at a few different boards and, well, a couple different boards and commission changes. We looked at some of our review boards, turning them into a sort of group of 3 volunteer hearing officers instead on an as-needed basis, so that we don't have to keep a rarely used appeal board at quorum and make it a little easier on our clerks. That will be coming to the Assembly. Then we also looked at an ordinance that is amending the Historic Resources Advisory Committee to more of an as-needed basis due to sort of staff capacity, with the hopes of, through the comp plan, working their charge so that we can more accurately reflect their duties and their ability to serve our community. Then lastly, we looked at an ordinance for ranked choice voting. Lots of good questions and conversation on that topic, and that will be heading your way to the COW. So I also have a few board and commission appointments.
Go ahead.
Perfect. The first is Local Emergency Planning Committee. I move the Assembly forward to the State of Alaska Emergency Response Commission the appointment of Jacob Thayer, Bartlett Regional Hospital, Seat 5, and Kirsten Johnson, Bartlett Regional Hospital, Seat 5A, to terms beginning immediately and ending December 31st, 2026, and to appoint Michael Mazouch, Community Group, Seat 9, for a term beginning immediately and ending December 31st, 2027, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection to that motion? Seeing none, those people are appointed.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Then we have for Personnel Board, I move the Assembly reappoint Allison Radford and Kenneth Sutherland, both to the Personnel Board Management Representative seats for terms beginning immediately and ending January 31st, 2028, and ask for unanimous consent.
Seeing no objection, those people are appointed.
And to the PRAC, I move the Assembly appoint Jennifer Gross and to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee for an unexpired term beginning immediately, ending April 30th, 2026, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Seeing no objection, those people are appointed as well.
Thank you. That is all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson. Ms. Uscandies is not here for Public Works. I'll just briefly go. Should I just do this? Anyway, we discussed the revolving loan fund for the HESCO barrier through the DEC revolving loan fund, which was in our packet tonight. Got an update on Juneau International construction projects. Moving an ordinance to remove a rarely never used something regarding to thawing services in the utility. And we got a couple updates on battery electric buses and PWFC, Public Works Facilities Committee milestones. In the COW, we had the Huntington Corp doc presentation, discussion, asked questions. We introduced it as an ordinance for April beginning of April. We introduced it tonight. My goal is to do any amendments on March 17th. So if you have any, be prepared, because we are planning to go through those. Of course, the will of the body, but that would be my goal. We discussed the election ordinance that we just passed tonight, provided the manager some guidance on Burns Building negotiations, approved an appropriation to be introduced for Marie Drake, public outreach and design, and introduced an ordinance about tax exemption spanning multiple construction seasons. Those are our liaison updates, I believe. Any assembly comments and questions or any updates any assembly members want to make? Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. First of all, I did want to just double check with the Chair of Human Resources that the first motion she made, that was for the Local Emergency Planning Committee.
Ms. Atkinson.
Yes.
All right, thank you. I'll be real quick. One of my liaison assignments, that was CSWA. We met during Southeast Conference. Our next meeting is actually going to be on Wednesday. I have been in touch with Liz Perry from Travel Judo about the Forest Service layoffs, and if there's anything that comes of that, I'll keep in touch with the Assembly.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Sorry, any other liaison reports people would like to give? Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Just wanted to, there are a few things happening in my liaison world, but the one I really wanted to highlight for you all was tomorrow is, I believe, the last advisory committee meeting for the Pell study for the North Douglas Crossing project. So I've had a chance now to read their final level 2 screening, and just wanted to give you all a heads up. You'll see it soon. So what the level 2 was, the process has been taking potential alternatives of locations and slowly narrowing them by applying them to criteria. And so level 1, they had narrowed down to 7 options, including no build. As of level 2, they removed just one recommended alternative. So they're recommending the removal of the Mendenhall Peninsula option because that was estimated at $1.1 to $1.7 billion. So it actually scored pretty high, but because of the price tag, they're going to recommend removal. The other options that are left on the table, I'm going to put them in order based on their scoring from highest to lowest against the criteria, just so you know which those are. Salmon Creek came in first, Twin Lakes second, Vanderbilt third. I should say Salmon Creek, Twin Lakes, no build, Vanderbilt, Sunny Point East, Sunny Point West. You'll see that, there's tension in there. Salmon Creek came first, also the least popular in the survey option. So, but because it was outside of the refuge, scoring higher. We'll see what happens next, but just wanted to give you all an update on that project moving forward. And I'm sure it'll be coming to the public and then to the Assembly soon afterwards.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Wall. Other liaison reports? Mr. Steininger.
I'll keep it real brief and just mention that at the Bartlett Regional Hospital board meeting, they discussed a plan to pay back the $2 million appropriated from the city to Bartlett when they're having financial difficulties. Their plan is paid off over a course of 3 years. So first payment of $666 or $677 with the no guarantee that the second and third payments come in, but really trying to show that they are willing to pay back when we help them.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Steininger. Ms. Hall.
For my liaisons, the school district, I attended their meeting virtually on the 11th. And just briefly, it did come up, board members asking Superintendent Hauser about the playground plan for Zonta Kahini. And he did say that they plan to address the interim needs while waiting, and he said he would make sure resources were available and they don't need budget amendments for that. So that was just to address some of the concerns that were brought to us this evening. My other liaison is Juneau Commission on Aging, and I was unable to attend their February meeting, but we have one coming up on the 11th.
Very good.
Thank you. Oh, and I also attended the Alaska Miner Association legislative meeting, as well as the JEDC Innovation Summit this last week. Whatever, it's all a blur. Anyway, thank you.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Ms. Hall. Any other liaison updates, assembly member comments or questions? Seeing Ms. Mayer with her hand raised. Madam Mayor.
Sorry, I forgot to poll everybody. We are looking at April 9th as a potential date for our joint airport board meeting. This is a Wednesday that is not being used by finance, so we would have a meeting that night. So I'm just seeing who's available for that. Let's do it this way. Who's not available for April 9th? So Wednesday. Seeing none, we look like we have a quorum, so city manager, take note. We'll work with them to make sure that's a good date for them, but we just wanted to make sure it was worked for the assembly. That's all I have, thanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay. We're now on to continuation of public participation on non-agenda items. Is there any member of the public who wants to comment on non-agenda items? Seeing none. We have executive session, and we are planning to have executive session. Ms. Cathcart, are we, or Madam Manager, whoever, are we going to come back into public session after executive session, or no, we'll just, okay, so we'll end the public meeting, go into executive session, and then will we just be staying here?
Correct.
Okay.
We're going to stop the Zoom, stop the live stream, and then we'll bring the mayor into a different Zoom because
Okay.
yeah.
Excellent. Very good. Mr. Bryson, a motion for executive session.
Yes, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I move the assembly into executive session to discuss matters, the immediate knowledge of which could have an adverse effect on city finances, specifically an update on collective bargaining. And I ask for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Seeing no objection to that motion, we are in executive session. Thanks, everyone. And we'll take a 10-minute break.